All right, we're live, Jeff. How are you?
I'm great. How are you? Good morning.
Uh, I am doing, for some reason, my voice just went weird. But yeah, welcome to the Love What You Do podcast and show. And today, my guest is Jeff Steinman, and he is the founder of Transform STL, and he's on a mission to unify St. Louis by transforming homes in the city and bringing people closer together. So, welcome, man, and thanks for being on.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here, Brad. Thanks so much
All
for having
right.
me on.
So, I mean, we were just talking a few minutes ago about a little bit about your mission and how that, and I want people to really discover themselves through your story. I mean, because you haven't been doing this since you popped out of the womb, right?
Nope.
You've got your own unique story, and that's led you into something you've been really passionate about and been able to inspire not only just people around you, but some of the youth in the city and other things of that nature. So yeah, I want to hear and help share your message so people can find something for themselves.
Yeah. Um, and I feel really strongly compelled, before I start talking too much, to just recognize uh, where we are in the world here on June 2nd, 2020.
Yeah.
Um, it was, I think, a week ago yesterday that George Floyd was killed by the police in Minneapolis. And all across the country, uh, we have folks who are angry and hurt and sad about what happened.
Yeah.
And I'm uh, thinking back to 1992 when we had the incident with Rodney King. And I remember I was in high school at the time and not old enough to understand really what was going on. But now, in retrospect, I look at that like almost 30 years later, and we're still having the same conversation. And uh, I think I just want to recognize that uh, Black folks out there are really, really suffering and really hurting. And us white folks are um, only beginning to wake up to what's going on. And what I've been, my goal, I guess, goal is not the right word. What I've been doing, what I've been trying to do is to just remember two things, particularly as a white person with the privilege that I have in this world. And that's to listen and to love, and making those two things just my core focus. And I would invite all the white folks out there who were listening to just do that. There's any individual one of us. Um, there isn't a whole lot we can do, but what we certainly can do is we can shut our mouths, we can listen, and by listen, means just really listening from your heart and love.
Yeah.
And I'd like to maybe answer your question with that as a backdrop to where we are, to what my mission has been. Um, I I went through high school and college. College took me almost 10 years because I just hated it so much. And it was so not the thing for me. Um, but along the way, I ended up stumbling into pretty nice career in technology. Worked for a couple of the big investment firms and banks. When I left, was doing a lot of the biggest projects I did were around their websites, and so I managed projects and programs, particularly around the websites that you log on to see your information, how much money you made, how much you made or lost that day.
Yeah.
And that was an amazing experience, but it was also an experience that left me with a lot of money, but not with any real satisfaction in life. And I'd love to say I left that job because I wanted to do something more meaningful with my life. Well, that's not actually what happened. I left the job because I just didn't like it anymore, and it was boring. And I thought that I could make more money as an entrepreneur. And went out on my own, started doing some business and marketing consulting, and wrote How to Quit Working, the book, and did the podcast, and did some coaching around that. And in my journey to make that online platform successful, which I thought I wanted an online platform because I thought everybody told me that that's what I wanted, right? And I drank the Kool-Aid. I was like, oh, start an online business. And I did that. And well, guess what? It wasn't as easy as they told me in the $2,000 training program or the $30,000 coaching. It was the hardest thing I ever did. And what's interesting is, in trying to make that work financially, somebody at some point in some coaching program that I was in said, Jeff, you need to find your passion. I was like, oh shit. Okay. The only way I'm going to make money is if I find my freaking passion. Like, all right. So I kind of, I don't know. I was like grasping at it. I was groping for it. What's funny is I always had this thought. I was like, well, once I get this online business going, then I can just fix houses for fun. I'm just pausing to let that sink in.
Fix houses for fun. That's the indication.
So, yeah. So this long journey of that, and I was running this online business, and I was so miserable. I was absolutely miserable. I'm trying to decide how authentic I want to be here.
All the way authentic, or it's not authentic.
Okay. So for a year and a half, I got through life by running my online business during the day, and then at night getting really high and dreaming about having a real estate business. And it's interesting because there's all these debates about the uses of marijuana and what's not. And I think there's plenty of times when folks use it in a non-productive way.
Yeah.
But frankly, what it did for me was it allowed me to get through my own crap enough that I could visualize and manifest. And then there was this sort of, and as you know, I know you talk a lot about law of attraction, Brad, and your listeners are probably fairly familiar with it. But what happened ultimately for me is that vision became stronger than reality. And ultimately the dissonance pulled me away from that online business, and I no longer was able to put one foot in front of the other on that, and fortunately began to take some steps towards uh, towards doing something in real estate. And um, what's really interesting is, yes, I really do love fixing houses, right? I mean, I really do love, for example, as I just turn this around, look at this stained glass there behind me. That kind of stuff. I really, really love that stuff. Just
You
makes
get
me
lost
really,
in it?
really. I'm sorry?
When you're doing that, do you get lost in it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And in fact, I look at these windows and I think to myself, how fun would it be to just take them apart and completely restore them?
If you're
And
not thinking like that, it might not be what you really care about.
yeah, and most people would think that that's insane, and it is insane. But it's not for me, and that's what makes it amazing. But what's interesting is, um, the logistics of it and the mechanics of it, uh, the um, the visual piece of it. I should say the actual house piece of it.
Yeah.
For me, while it's a huge passion, I'm not going to start crying about those windows. I mean, like I love them, I really do. Um, and I probably would even go so far as to say I feel a spiritual connection to these windows and doors and floors and millwork, but it's not going to bring me to tears.
Yeah.
Um, so it's almost like that was this bridge to uh, something greater. And I'll share a couple of experiences that are, I think, for one thing, timely right now and very pertinent. So I think I know it was on my birthday, and I'm thinking it was maybe 2016, maybe 2015, something like that. I was, God, this is fascinating if I do say so myself. I've never put this all together like this. Uh, um, it, so it was my birthday, and it was not a happy birthday for a lot of reasons. Wait a minute, that would have been my 40th, I think. No, that would have been my 41st. My bad. Never mind. So yeah, I was not happy, and I was like, all right, well, it's March 6th, it's spring, it's a beautiful day, I'm going to do whatever I can to make myself happy. I ended up having lunch at Fitz's with a friend in the Loop, and we had a really great time. And then we left there, and I said, you know what, I'm just going to walk around and look at pretty old houses. So I went north of Delmar in St. Louis, and I found an area that I wasn't familiar with, and I parked my truck, and I got out, started walking around, looking at houses, and I was having a fantastic time, just losing myself in that. Uh, uh, Specifically, I remember uh, this this one older couple that I saw there, and just had a great chat with them. And um, I posted on Facebook, and I said, "Hey, I'm just excited to look at him. I'm here, wherever I'm at, looking at these houses." Um, and for the folks not in St. Louis, this is an area that many would consider to be distressed or um, low income, and many would call it dangerous. And uh, somebody messaged me or commented or whatever it was, and they said something along the lines of, "Gosh, Jeff, you really shouldn't be walking around alone up there. You should really be careful." And as I'm walking along, I see there's a corner with a vacant lot, and there was a group of kids playing, maybe 5 or 6 kids. maybe like between 8 and 10, and they're just playing. And the thing that hit me like a ton of bricks is, why does somebody care that I'm up here walking around in this, and I'm doing air quotes if you're not watching, dangerous neighborhood?
Yeah.
But nobody seems to care that these kids are up. Like, it's okay for them to be here. So why does somebody care about me? Where's the concern for the children? And it was such a um, it was just such a messed up uh, I'm having trouble like putting it into words. I think I got the general point across, right?
Yeah.
But um, that was this just one of these shifting points for me. And then the by far the biggest shifting point was in uh, 2014. If I remember correctly, it was right after the Michael Brown killing. Um, I was walking. I'm pretty sure it was on a Sunday. I was walking down Cherokee Street, and at the time I smoked cigarettes, and I was walking down the street on a nice day. It was loud. There was a lot of cars, a lot of stuff going on, and I was smoking a cigarette. So I had the cigarette in my hand. I'm holding it down, and there's I'm walking along the sidewalk, and this black kid on a bike rides kind of past me, and he turns around on his bike while he's still moving. Bike's still moving. He turns around and he points. Now, bear in mind, this is in the midst of all the Michael Brown stuff that's going on. And he says something to me. And I couldn't hear what he said because of the background noise, but I heard two words. And the two words that I heard were cut and kill. And I just remember my heart was like racing. It's like, what the hell's going on? But he kept writing, turned around and never looked back. And there's a name for this. So you can think you didn't hear something, but then when you think about it and process it, you can figure out what was actually said. And as I thought about it and I processed it, I realized that he was pointing to my cigarette. And he said, "You better cut that out. It's going to kill you." And I still get a chill when I tell that story. So I remember walking from Cherokee all the way over to Grand that day, and I just sort of sat down on a bench on Grand, and I just remember thinking, the thought that just kept going through my head was, we have got to do something different. And let's see, that was 2016. I guess it was not too long after that that I was able to pull together the resources to do my first full. I'd done small projects and whatnot, but that's when I pulled together what I needed to do my first full gut rehab on a house. And and then certainly just kind of got caught up in the logistics of doing it, right? I mean, finding the right contractors and finding the funding and making sure that I was putting in the right finishes to make it sell, and selling it, and all of that sort of stuff. But I guess I was always keeping in mind that this has to be about more than just the houses. This can't just be about the houses. And um, along the same path, I'll skip the story and just get to the punchline. But I met a guy by the name of Neil Richardson and Mike Woods, and they founded a not-for-profit called Dream Builders for Equity. Dream Builders, the number 4 Equity. And what that organization does is they work with at-risk youth to help them earn money for college and learn construction and real estate skills. Ooh. And one of the things I think that that I took from the time that I spent, very brief time that I spent interacting with that organization and folks within it, is just the importance of what we do when we rehab houses, how important that is to the communities, and what a huge, huge effect that it has on communities. And that effect can be positive, and that effect can be negative, and it can be everything in between.
Yeah.
And I think that the biggest thing for me is it has helped me to recognize that real estate isn't just an investment. It isn't just a flip. I hate that word. I call it the 4-letter F word. And I hate it with a passion. I do not flip properties. I rehab properties. We did our first rehab in Gravois Park, and it sold. It was a disaster in so many different ways. not because of Gravois Park, not because of the people in the neighborhood, because of it was just a disaster project. It was a project that one of the worst ones I've done. But you said be authentic, so
yeah. No, tell us all the rosy stuff that happened.
No, it was a really frustrating one, but it was also one that proved out a concept. And we sold that house for, I want to say $115 or $120,000, $120,000. It's about 1,200 square feet, and it was the first time that I think we were really intentional in saying, let's rehab a house and make it a house that somebody who lives in the neighborhood could afford. And that was for me, that was huge, because that was the first time. And while it was indeed a disaster, it wasn't a disaster in a way of like, I'd never do that again. It was a disaster just in different ways. And I'd maybe needed it to be a disaster to learn the things that I learned going through it. But
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Tons of lessons, probably the hard way.
Yeah, and I don't learn any other way. So,
me too. The process sucks.
Yeah. But it proved out a concept, and it proved that we can do this in a way that works, and in a way that works financially, and in a way that works for the neighborhood. And somewhere along the line, I heard this somebody say something about we want to do this real estate project with the neighborhood, not to the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I really try to think that way. And what I'm really clear on is that Transform STL has a very, very long way to go before we are actually contributing to the neighborhoods and the people in the way that I want to. What we're doing right now is we are groping for a way to really improve the neighborhoods, in a way that is sensitive and in a way that is meaningful and helpful to the people in the neighborhood. So, we did the house in Gravois Park. We have actually 2 more projects coming up in Gravois Park. I'm actually really loving working in Gravois Park. And Gravois Park, just for folks who are not from St. Louis or may not be familiar, that is one of the neighborhoods in St. Louis that many would call dangerous and many would call poor, and many would note racial inequities in that neighborhood. And I absolutely love being there, and I love doing the work there. But as an example, so groping at that mission is what we're doing, and I hope that I always say that we're just groping at the mission, because as long as I'm in that mindset, I'm trying to figure out how to actually make it better. But so we did that house, and I think that was a good thing. And we also did a neighborhood, an alley cleanup. So we had a bunch of folks come out and bring trash bags, and we're going to do another one. And we just went through the alley and just picked up trash, and went through the streets and picked up trash, and it felt really good, and we actually had a lot of fun. So I want to do more things like that, but just picking up trash in the alley is not, that's not the kind of impact that I want to have. That's where we start. And I think that the thing that I have, as I've been talking here on this podcast, the thing that I've really, I guess, realized is how and it's not, passion's not the right word, my love or my infatuation, whatever you want to call it, for historic architecture has been a bridge to really finding truly meaningful work in the world.
It's like you've
So
blended,
yeah.
it's like you've blended your skills of restoration, right?
Mm-hmm.
And your passion for restoring not only a home, like the physical structure of a home, but also a neighborhood, the people, and that being a symbol almost of restoration. Because those homes were once, I'm willing to bet, at the Gravois Park, and I know some of the area, I mean, those were bigger homes,
Mm-hmm.
those were well-to-do people back in the day, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you're restoring the dignity of what they once, were, right?
Yeah. And there's a whole lot of irony and a whole lot of beauty in watching the neighborhood come full circle in that way.
Yeah. I'm thinking of someone that's listening that has that, in that space where you're at, where like, I hate my job, or not hate my job, but like, you're not passionate about it anymore. You really don't care.
Mm-hmm.
And they have something that they're of interest, but they, there's like this place you're at here, right? And then there's this place where you will eventually get to if you take the leap, but you don't know all of the crap that's going to happen and all the stuff that's going to go on in order to get here. And you may not even have a real vision, right? What have you, I mean, if you're where you are now and you're looking back at yourself several years ago, and I know we can't, transform that time, but maybe what are a few things that if you were sitting back at that desk, at that job, would you tell yourself of like, this is where you should go and who you should be?
it's really interesting because I feel like in many ways, I feel like I've kind of rediscovered that high school kid and the dreams and aspirations of it, because it's like so much when I
Mm,
find something that's authentic, it's kind of like, yeah, I knew that when I was a kid, I knew that that's what I wanted to do, but I
really?
forgot when our culture beat that all out of me. Um,
You
but
forgot.
I think it's because I was wrestling with the question, because my first thought was to say, well, just do what you did because that was your journey and you needed to do that. And I mean, that's true, but there's also this piece. Okay, yeah, I'm getting there. I'm
No, you're
getting to the
fine.
answer.
And this
um,
is the exact process people go through, right?
yeah,
Right. Yeah.
exactly. And this, we got this weird meta thing going on that's kind of blowing my mind. But my first thought was to say, well, you just gotta fucking stumble through it like I did. And then I'm like, no, actually, I mean, yes, you definitely have to stumble through it to some degree, but then there's also this part of me. I'm going to use my I language rather than saying you, but there's this part of me that always knew a lot of this. Didn't know the specifics,
Yeah.
right? But I knew that um, working with kids uh, was always going to be important. And and thank goodness I didn't do that in my 20s and 30s. Thank goodness I had no business. I was too much of a mess to be around kids. I mean, really, like I was not somebody that any kid should model after or try to be like when I was in my 20s and 30s. Um, but um, but yeah, I mean, there's this thing that I always had in my heart, and if you're not watching, I'm gesturing at my heart, that I just knew but didn't pay attention to. So I think remember how I one of the ways I tipped this off, which is I said, yeah, once I get this real estate business, or once I get this online business going, then I can do real estate for fun.
Yeah.
Like that's a major, right? Like if Brad, if you were my coach back then, you would have picked up on that and probably,
Called you out.
yeah. What would you have said to me if I'd have said you that in the coaching session?
Well, some of the internet connection cut out, but what I'm hearing is that you were really, you would have been mentioning real estate, multiple times,
Mhm.
right? And I would have dug into that, and I said,
Yeah.
well, what's there for you? What's this all about? And the question that I really want to ask right now is, what was that thing as a kid you were thinking of? What was that dream as a kid? Was it Daddy Warbucks, real estate investor, transforming STL? Because I'm willing to bet it's probably not, but it's probably in the realm of something.
I didn't know what St. Louis was when I was a little kid. I grew up in the Metro East, so we just came over here for ball games, like once a year we would come to St. Louis. But um, what's that's a really great question, and the answer is when I wish I knew how old I was, but I was probably starting when I was like maybe 9 or 10. My favorite thing to do was to watch This Old House.
Really?
hmm And I would cover everything with sheets and pretend like I was remodeling my room.
What's Bob's
um,
last? Remember Bob's last name? Uh,
Bob Vila.
Bob Vila.
Bob Vila, yeah.
You look like Bob Vila right now a little bit.
Oh my God.
I can
Uh,
see it.
but I'm way younger than Bob Vila and much better looking. But but yeah, like I think I was having a conversation with a friend of mine about she's my spiritual guru. Her name is Stephanie. Um, and about play, right? And about how when we're kids, what we decide to play is important. And but we forget to do that as adults. We don't play as adults. and play is an important thing. So I think looking at how I played as a kid is important. And then as I got into high school, and my 3 years after high school, I worked at summer camps, which was, in retrospect, the 3 funnest summers of my entire life. And when I have a couple of friends, I have 2 friends in particular whose kids were, before COVID, were planning on working at summer camps. And I like made it a point to look right in that 17, 18-year-old's eyes and say, the 3 summers that I worked at summer camps were the funnest of my life. So enjoy it. But so, there's an opportunity, or there's a point at which early in my life I'm getting the clues as to what I'm really all about. And having said that, like that's an interesting thing to pay attention to. And in retrospect, I think unemotionally, I can look back and say I wasn't ready for any of that in my 20s or even my 30s.
Yeah.
I just wasn't the man that I needed to be yet.
It's pretty, I think that's a really powerful question, and I've done a lot of this, and I even have, my course on finding your purpose. And the question of like, what did I like to play as a kid? It's really powerful.
Yeah.
Like I love to make people laugh as a kid, I even did a magic show, so I know like these interviews are a part of me being able to just have fun with people, and the more I can have fun on these calls and on these interviews and but do it in a way that's meaningful, right? Because that's also a part of me. Like I also know like there's, it's not just about having fun, but like, can we have fun while we're doing meaningful work?
Yeah.
And so there's kind of my thread inside of this, and this is where I see myself too, looking back. I didn't see podcasting or coaching. I was out exploring and having fun and making people laugh.
Yeah.
And I thought I was going to be a priest as a kid. But then I learned about girls. And, very powerful force. And that steered me away very fast. And I think it's when you can look through it through that lens of like, what did I really care about as a kid that I got fascinated about? That can give you really powerful insights. Like if you're practicing being Bob Vila as 9 or 10-year-old kid, and right now, if this is someone listening and they're an accountant and they hate their job and they go home and they can't wait for the weekend to start working on their deck, or they're working on the basement to redo or something, there's something there that needs to be admitted to yourself, the permission to say, that's not who I am. I just did that because I needed to at the time. And then giving yourself the permission to say, yes. Was there a moment for you when you gave yourself that permission to say, you know what, I think I can actually turn this into something that, could sustain me and create a lifestyle for me? And I'm not talking about millions and billions of dollars of being super rich, but,
well, I'm loaded.
Say what?
I'm loaded.
Good.
Yeah, I made 1.2 billion last year. I'm just kidding.
But you get the heart of the question. Is like,
yeah,
a lot of people get caught up in like they have to pay for all their bills and stuff like that, right? And I get that. And what do you really need to get by? What do you really need to get by to do what you love?
One of the things that scared me the most about leaving my corporate job was, what will I do without steak dinners? What will I do without $75 bottles of wine? What will I do without my scotch? I'm not an alcoholic, I swear. Just a little
First
bit.
steps awareness. Okay.
um, but and those are specific examples, but it was like, how am I going to manage without this lifestyle? And it is unbelievable how freeing it is. And by the way, um, I went for years. I don't think I ate a steak, you know, because maybe at like Applebee's. Um, and I think that that piece of it was really, really hard for me on one level, but it was also really, really freeing. And I've become now um, what I would consider to be a minimalist. And it's totally changed the way I look at physical possessions. And as part of that, um, there's been this whole journey around sort of switching around um, my mentality from being about like, I need to have this pile of money and then I can go do this, to being more about, I need to make this commitment and then the money will show up.
Don't talk about the C word on this show, okay?
The C word?
Commitment.
Ah, gotcha.
I have
Well,
just discovered the C word and I've been stepping into it and it's been very
mm,
powerful.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, and and to answer your question, I think is there was this moment. So first of all, I just want to put a fine point on that, and that is to say that I used to think that having large amounts of money was the way to be free.
Hmm.
And now I found that having large amounts of trust is the way to be free.
Ooh.
And you don't need the money. I mean, you do, but it'll show up, and that can't be. I try really, really hard, and I don't get it right most of the time, but I try really hard to not let money be the deriving factor of decisions,
Yeah.
especially ones that involve people or really important things in my life. Um, but to go back to your question of what was the moment, and there was this moment. I remember I was sitting at my old house, which was a
My
very
old
beautiful
house.
house that I still miss. Yeah, it was my big 3-story house that I restored lovingly, very lovingly, and that was a very important process. But I was sitting at the fire pit, and then I sold it and lost an ungodly amount of money on it. And but I was sitting there at the fire pit, and I was like, at some point, I'm just going to have to quit this job, right? And I had this realization of, I'm just going to have to make it work, because it was like, there's never going to be this point where all the stars are lined up and you've got exactly the amount of money in your bank account, and this is going to happen, and it's all going to come together. Like, um,
Yeah.
for me, I didn't believe that was going to happen. And I had been for years hoping that I would get laid off and get a severance package that would at least soften the blow. But that never happened. So yeah, I just had that moment. I was like, well, I'm just going to make it work.
I think it's a very soft point, but it's probably a very strong foundation.
Mm,
And the realization for someone to go through, I am going to be the one that makes it work, you
mm,
know, with the help of other people, obviously. You can't do anything alone in this world. Um, it really bumps up against our identity, is bumped up against my own identity. Who am
mm,
I to create this? Who am I to be this? Like, I'm not a real estate investor. I'm not, the founder of an organization. I'm an employee, you know, I'm little old me or whatever.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
I remember a few years ago, I had a coach call me out and she said, "You want to be a leader?" And so I started taking these notes. She was giving me notes, and I said, okay. And so I was writing my name down. I was like, I'm Brad Finkeldye. I'm and then I hesitated, and I couldn't like easily just like write the words, I'm a leader. Like there was hesitation there from like my heart. Like I didn't
Mhm.
believe that about myself. And I think that's a really, I think that's the sticking point where most people don't uh, trust and don't take the leap because they don't really believe that it could be possible, and they don't believe in themselves.
Mhm.
And there's a certain point when it's that leap of faith, right? Of like, I'm going to go out and do this, and I'm going to create whatever I really want. And it's one of the hardest processes because you got to bust through all of your beliefs, about yourself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty cool when you get on the other side.
Yeah. And when you get on the other side, there's another thing, And
Oh,
one
yeah.
of the things that I've tried really hard, like in the past, I would say year and a half to 2 years, I've reached this point of just immense gratitude for who I've become. Um, and the folks watching and listening don't know this, but I had some tech issues this morning. So when I joined this call, I was fit to be tied. And what I appreciate is that I was able to just just be authentic with Brad and say, look, this is where I'm at. I'm pissed. I'm frustrated for all these reasons because Zoom is a giant piece of shit and my computer is a piece of shit. And and I could be authentic in that sense. Whereas there was a point not that long ago when I would have felt the need to be composed
Yeah.
because I couldn't let Brad see me like that, you know. And and I think that comes from I have a lot of gratitude for that because that comes from being okay. Like it's just like it doesn't make me a bad person that I was angry and pissed about technology this morning.
Yeah.
you know, I was just a guy who was angry about technology. um, so when you've got that, when you there is I mean, I started to say, well, there's always something on the other side. Like for me, the past couple of years, I just reached this point of just immense personal inner peace, um, which is just amazing. And I know there's people who know me who are listening and they're like, what the fuck are you talking inner peace? I, I hope those people are enjoying the laugh.
Are you talking about guys in the circle, like your men's
That
circle?
could be. That could
Okay,
be.
okay, okay, okay. Yeah.
But also, there's other folks in my life who would be like, "You are the least peaceful person I know." But trust me, it's on the inside. You can't see it because it's on the inside.
compare like I think I may have this, or at least let me know if I'm wrong, but compared to who you were and where you were not peaceful, and to like now, and
Yes.
like you are like you're centered and you know who you are and what you're up to, and there's gonna be frustrations, in this world, in any given moment, but where you were and where you are, like, you know, so much deeper and more peaceful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing for me is like I no longer have to depend on the exterior world to have all of its conditions the way I want them in order to be happy. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty cool. I found a lot of my peace through, we got reconnected to the Mankind Project.
Mhm.
And, I've done a lot of other personal development, and I've most recently been doing this thing called the Course in Miracles. And that's been an amazing process and brought a lot of deeper inner peace for me. And it's really cool. Like when you don't need, um, when you don't need the things or stuff, and you can just be like, huh, that's cool. All right, let's do that,
Yeah.
or whatever it is. It's like, you don't have to have the shirt and the tie and the right kind of pants and the designer this and the designer that, or you have to cut your grass perfectly, to impress your neighbor, which they don't really even care about you that much, or the fancy car, or the big giant house that gives you a big empty feeling on the inside because you're alone,
Yeah.
like all of that. And then to have the inner peace that which fills you up with this gratitude and love of like, I've discovered who I am and what I really care about. It's pretty
Mm.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this has been cool, man. Is there, we're kind of winding down and kind of wrapping up. Is there anything else that you want to share, or any other stories that you want to give back to the people that might be sitting in the same position you were a few years ago?
Yeah, I guess a couple of things. I think that if you're sitting in a job that you don't like, or a career that you don't like, and you want to do something more meaningful, or you want to make more money, I think that you you just have to focus on listening to your inner guidance, and you just got to move forward and do the best you can, and know that you're probably going to no, not probably, you're definitely going to screw up a lot. I mean, and this, I know this sounds cliche, but you're gonna have to make a lot of mistakes, and it's gonna suck. And um, but it's part of the process. And the person that I've become from the massive disaster that my life became, uh, I would not trade for anything in the entire world. The life that I've created, I mean, has allowed me um, to really focus on things that are important, and go even beyond um, what we've talked about here. There's um, uh, just incredibly grateful for where I am, and how I get to show up and be who I am in the world. And we could do a whole nother show about my personal life, and all the amazing things there, and all the challenges in the past, because there's a similar yet very intertwined journey there. I want to close with one thing. So I mentioned the organization Dream Builders for Equity that I was uh, very fortunate to get to work with and spend some time with the youth in that program a couple years ago. And there is one young man in that program who really stood out to me.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, his name was Marvin, and he when I knew him, he was, I think, 17, 18, and he just had a fire, and he had a passion, and he had a drive, and he had a massive heart, and just you could just tell he just really, really cared about people. And the first time that I got to have a meaningful conversation with him, I just knew that he was going to do big things. I just knew that he was um, destined for some really great things. And 1 week ago today, um, at the age of 20, Marvin died. And I'm committed to, for a lot of reasons. Um, you know, I'm struggling to make sense of it. I'm struggling to find some meaning in it, and all of that. Um, and I can't even fathom what his family, his mom, his brother, uh, his friends must be going through. Uh, but I've been greatly saddened by this. That's such a, anything I say just sounds so silly in this moment. But I've had a picture of him up on my computer throughout this interview. So, something about his heart and his spirit that I want to take with me through the rest of my life. And I just want to honor him, and I want to just encourage anybody who is feeling inspired by what I said, and wants to help contribute to making the city a more loving, vibrant, and unified place. I would encourage you to go to Dream Builders for the number 4 equity.org. Again, Dream Builders number 4 equity.org, and there's a donate button. Open your heart, but open your wallet. Open it really big, because the money that you donate there goes to help these really talented, amazing young men and women achieve their dreams. And think about it. If you're planning on going out and having $100 dinner, get a burrito.
It's just as good
instead, and give some money to that organization, especially white people. This is a time for white folks to just really step up and show our Black brothers and sisters and neighbors and friends and family that we're with them, because that's the best we can do right now.
We're all with you, whether we realize it or not. Yeah, it's pretty cool, man. Thank you for sharing your story. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.